Beware the step there, whoever's coming up here. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start with a personal story, if I may. This is rather unconventional. It's about this wonderful city of peace and the wonderful Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan loved Geneva. He made it his home away from home after stepping down from his tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. And then he founded his foundation here, of course. One day, he had an appointment at the Palais Wilson, the office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as you all know. I was fortunate enough to accompany him to that appointment. And while we were waiting for the appointment to arrive, he strolled over to the French windows. And those of you who know the office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the office overlooks the lake, and he stood there for a while. For a few seconds, he gazed at the splendor of the lake of peace, the peaceful lake, and the majestic snow-capped Mont Blanc beyond. And then he said, "Forgive me, Nan, this is the best I can do. Ahmad." He always dropped the H, which was very sensible. "Ahmad, this is why we bring warring factions to Geneva. To settle their differences here. Perhaps they will be inspired and do the same in their own countries." Voila, the love story of Kofi Annan and Geneva. Mr. Griffiths, hello. Mrs. Nan Annan, Madame la Conseillère d'État, Nathalie Fontanet, Mr. Keith Krause, Director of the Center on Conflict Development and Peacebuilding at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the 5th edition of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address, a high-level lecture on peace by a distinguished personality with a wealth of knowledge and experience, held every year as part of the Geneva Peace Week. It is organized by the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Graduate Institute, and the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform. On the 18th of August 2018, Kofi Annan, the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations, suddenly died. And suddenly, the world lost an extraordinary leader, an icon of peace and diplomacy. His vision, his integrity, his courage, his compassion, and his wisdom are sorely missed in the world today. As crises multiply, from bloody conflicts to military coups, rising hunger, natural disaster, we are in dire need of courageous, imaginative, and ethical leadership of the kind he showed on so many occasions. Kofi Annan used to say, and I quote, "We have the means and the capacity." That inimitable low voice was somehow very loud because you had to listen very carefully. We have the means and the capacity to deal with our problems if only we can find the political will. The political will. This is precisely the mandate of the Kofi Annan Foundation. His legacy lives through the foundation and that team, wonderful team at the foundation, which he established in 2007 to serve as a catalyst for political will, lasting peace, and inclusive governance. Forgive me. Before I invite the first speaker, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to extend a very warm welcome to Mrs. Nana Nan. There's so much I can say about you, but I will spare you the embarrassment. Just to say that we saw you and Kofi as role models of mutual respect and collaboration, true partners in life. Thank you for joining us today. I would now like to invite Mr. Keith Krause, Director of the Center on Conflict Development and Peace Building at the Geneva Graduate Institute, to deliver his remarks. Keith.
Thank you for this, and Excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure to welcome you also on behalf of the Director of the Geneva Graduate Institute, Mediator, to the 2025 Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address at the Maison de la Paix. And I noted from the presentation, the 12th Geneva Peace Week, which I have to say I'm proud that we have launched many years ago and incubated here at the Graduate Institute. Today, we're facing multiple and overlapping crises, from wars and displacement to humanitarian emergencies, the climate crisis, growing inequality, and digital and technological divides. It's not easy to keep in sight what connects us, yet it's precisely in these moments that we need some voices that work to reaffirm our shared humanity and to underline the importance of our responsibility and our interests in acting collectively in order to build a more just and peaceful world. Kofi Annan reminded us frequently, including in this building, that peace is not a static condition. It cannot, as we have seen in countless recurring and endemic situations of armed conflict and large-scale violence, it cannot be taken for granted. It requires sustained efforts at local, national, regional, and global levels within communities, across divides, and sustained through trust building. It demands solidarity, humility, and respect for the dignity of all. I do not need to tell this audience that Geneva has long stood as a hub, perhaps a hub under threat, for diplomacy, humanitarian action, and global cooperation, all of which are cornerstones of the, shall we say, eroding or challenged global order. So we're reminded here, especially during Geneva Peace Week, of our responsibility to keep these forms of dialogue and practical action alive and relevant for new and next and future generations. This is obviously also, of course, a responsibility that aligns with the mission and the values of the Geneva Graduate Institute. So the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address provides us each year with a chance to reflect on the challenges we face, and hopefully to explore ways to reinforce or renew the commitment to peace. So following the keynote address by Martin Griffiths, international mediator and former United Nations Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, who I think will get a much longer introduction shortly, we will hear from three young peace builders who embody the hope and determination of a new generation. Their voices will remind us that peace is not the responsibility of one generation alone, but a collective endeavor that must evolve with each era. They will probably also charge us with failing in many respects in our mission. I look forward to hearing their perspectives on how to build a more inclusive and sustainable approach for peace. Finally, I would like to thank our partners, the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, for their longstanding collaboration, as well as the République et Canton de Genève et la Ville de Genève for continued support. On behalf of all of the partners, I welcome you for joining us this evening to carry forward Kofi Annan's legacy of dialogue, dignity, and shared humanity. And it's now my pleasure to invite Nathalie Fontanet, conseillère d'État et présidente du Conseil d'État of the République et Canton de Genève, to take the floor for your words of introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, in your titles and function, excellencies, thank you for being here with us today for this 5th edition of the Discours of Kofi Annan on the Peace in Geneva. The cantonal and municipal authorities are very, very proud to support this event, which is an essential event and which comes to terminate the week peace in Geneva. As we gather here tonight, we face a sobering reality that would have deeply concerned Kofi Annan himself. Today, the International Committee of the Red Cross counts a record high of more than 130 active conflicts worldwide, a figure not seen since World War II. Behind these stark statistics lie profound human tragedies. Women, children, men, elderly persons, and people living with disabilities whose lives and destinies have been capsized and shattered. In 2024, civilian death in conflicts increased by 40%, according to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The civilian population has become the primary victim of armed conflicts, enduring forced displacement, injuries, trauma, and the cruel separation of families. These are not mere numbers. They represent the hopes, dreams, and futures of millions of our fellow human beings. Yet, in the face of this overwhelming darkness, we must not lose sight of the light that still burns brightly. That light is hope, offered in particular by organizations working tirelessly to help people affected by conflicts and providing them with protection as well as with assistance when they need it most. Many of these beacon organizations call Geneva home. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, which our distinguished speaker, Martin Griffiths, led with such dedication until recently, exemplifies this mission. Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs mobilizes and coordinates international humanitarian action in response to crisis, working to save lives, protect people, and defend the rights of affected populations. It is an essential mission at a time when humanitarian needs have never been more overwhelming. Geneva has long nurtured the spirit of service. It was here that Martin Griffiths founded the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue in 1999, as an institution that the Canton of Geneva has proudly supported financially since 2010. Through this leadership, as both organizations, Mr. Griffiths has shown us how mediation and negotiation can be revitalized to promote the de-escalation of violence and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. This is Geneva's calling, to be the sanctuary where expertise in negotiation, mediation, and the promotion of peace can flourish. Our city has been home for many years to organizations working on this crucial agenda, building bridges where others see only walls, creating dialogue where others hear only silence. But we must be honest about our limitations. The exceptional work of these institutions depends ultimately on the political will of states to end conflicts. As Martti Ahtisaari, Nobel Prize winner and former president of Finland, once said, "War are started by men and can therefore be ended by men." This truth brings us back to the legacy of Kofi Annan, who made peace the central theme not only of his mandate at the United Nations, but also of his foundation, which our canton supports. Kofi Annan understood something fundamental, that lasting peace requires the energy, vision, and commitment of young people. He always recognized the central role of youth in the peace agenda and the importance of involving them in peace process and conflict prevention. Tonight, we will hear from rising peace builders who embody this vision. Their voices remind us that peace is not the privilege of seasoned diplomats alone, but the responsibility of every generation, every community, every individual who refuses to accept that conflicts is inevitable. Geneva, as the city of peace, has always understood this. From the International Committee of the Red Cross to the League of Nations, from countless humanitarian organizations to today's vibrant peace-building community, we have remained a beacon of solidarity, international cooperation, and the rule of law. In this time of rising international tension, threatening the very foundation of multilateral cooperation, Geneva's role becomes even more crucial. We are the neutral hub where people can still find refuge, where diplomatic summits can still occur, where discreet mediation efforts can still bear fruits. More than ever before in human history, we share a common destiny. Climate change knows no borders. Pandemics respect no sovereignty. Economic crises ripple across continents. We can master these challenges only if we face them together. Today, we have once again an opportunity to embrace the spirit of Geneva, to unite our voices, to amplify the message of peace, and to build bridges of understanding across all the divides that separate us. By doing so, we honor the memory of Kofi Annan, and we reaffirm our commitment to a world where every individual can live a life of dignity and of security. Let us remember Kofi Annan's own word, that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, of law, of order, in short, of government. Peace is not a destination we reach, but a journey that requires our constant attention and dedication. Thank you very much for your attention, and may this year's Geneva Peace Address serve once again as catalyst for change, a call to action, and a source of hope for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Fontanier, Madame la Conseillère d'État, and President of the State Council of the Republican State of Geneva for your very pertinent remarks, which set the stage, really. Martin Griffiths is recognized as one of the most accomplished international mediators of conflicts around the world. He had, I'm going to age him now, he has half a century, that's 50 years of professional experience with the United Nations and other global institutions. He served most recently as the leader of the global humanitarian system, as well as the UN's principal troubleshooter in conflicts and complex crises. In this connection, Mr. Griffiths was the UN mediator of the Black Sea Grain Initiative involving Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey, which I understand was initiated also by the foundation you created, Humanitarian Dialogue, more or less. He was founding director of the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, established in Geneva in 1999, which has since become the world's largest private diplomacy organization. Mr. Griffiths also co-founded Mediated in London and served as founding director of the European Institute for Peace in Brussels. To date, Mr. Griffiths has led mediations in every continent, from Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, and Afghanistan to Spain, Sudan, Syria, and Venezuela. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming international mediator and former United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths.
He's lying, that's what I just heard.
I learned from the best.
It's wonderful to be here. Let me first get myself ready. Hello, Michael. It's a huge honor to be here. I never thought it. It's a huge honor because of Geneva, Madame Fontenay. It's a huge honor, Nan, because of you and Kofi. And it's a huge honor because of everybody in this room. And it's at a time of great, great peril. I want to thank all of you and thank Ahmed. We've worked often together, including with Mr. Annan, and dear friends and colleagues. Thank you for your warm introduction, not all true, and to the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Graduate Institute, which incidentally, this is an improvisation, was a place where Kofi Annan once said to me, "Why didn't you go and work there?" I didn't have any work at the time. I said, "I can't read. You know, that's one of my defects." He said, "Okay, stay where you are." And the Geneva Peace Building Platform, God save them, for giving me this opportunity. I'm honored to give this fifth peace address in Geneva because it's also the city that I call home. And the city that I have called home for many, many decades. And I'm very glad to be back. Geneva, as we've heard from Madame Fontenay, symbolizes the universal values that many of us have spent a lifetime trying to put into practice, promoting dialogue, as you have said, and international cooperation for peace, for humanitarian principles, the humanitarian hub, and for action, as importantly as anything else, to ensure human dignity and respect for international law. That's Geneva, and that's why I came back here from the United Nations. For me, this is also a deeply moving occasion. As Ruth and I, Ruth is there, yeah, have known Kofi and Nan to our huge privilege for many years. Both of us also had the immense privilege of working with him, and in Ruth's case, in his foundation. And we saw firsthand, and we'll never forget, the qualities he brought to his direct personal engagement in conflict resolution efforts. He was not just a speaker, he was not just an advocate, he was an actor, always active, always trying to turn words into results. He was a visionary leader, as Ahmed has said. He was a leader, a man with unbreakable principles, expounded with what I'd like to call an easy charm. Ahmed's low voice there, I guess. His political instincts and diplomatic skills, his empathy, his deep compassion for humanity, these made him the consummate peacemaker of his time, and indeed, I would say, of our times, because he is a historic figure, and his memory will rest with us for generations. I am one who misses his wisdom enormously. I am one who would love to see Kofi Annan here today, running the world, doing this, running about, telling us what to do, and I'm sorry. He's needed now, especially now. And I sometimes wonder what Kofi Annan would make of the world today. I'm sure, as you can imagine, that he would be deeply troubled and frustrated. But also, as he often said, including, I think, to the Security Council of the United Nations, a stubbornly optimistic man. He never gave up on optimism and the chance for improvement. But this is a hard world, and it's getting harder. The hopeful promise of the United Nations founders to save, as we know, those words, succeeding generations from the scourge of war, feels like a very, very distant dream these days. We are indeed in an age of long, deadly, and with few exceptions, wholly unnecessary wars. And again, you spoke to the numbers there, Madame Fontenay, where men, and it is always men, have felt free to destroy the lives of ordinary people in the service of their ideologies and ambitions. And I take the point that men can also stop wars, and should, and don't. We also see the laws of war shredded in plain sight. Parties to conflict, generally speaking, no longer even pretend to abide by international humanitarian law, a set of laws born in this city, or by any set of rules. Innocents across the world are killed, injured, displaced, and violated in addition, like an epidemic of violation with impunity. Atrocities are randomly justified, including the deliberate targeting and killing of aid workers, so long as their military objectives are achieved. And this is also a city which is a home to efforts to find justice for those aid workers and their families who have suffered the ultimate sacrifice. The numbers are chilling. We've already heard some. Global conflicts have doubled in the last 5 years, with approximately 20,000 deaths each month this year alone, which means that as we go through this beautiful evening, at least 10 souls will have died while we speak and while we discuss their future. Much of the world has turned a cold shoulder to this suffering. The global humanitarian appeal, which was where I was responsible last year, but this year's global humanitarian appeal sharply focused on priorities, and at a total of $45 billion for this year alone to assist 300 million people in need. It is 19% funded as of September, 19% funded. I don't think there's a year in history of doing this that has ever been so bad. 19% funded, when as we see the needs are rocketing. Aid is cutting, aid is running away, obligations are not being met. Long-running conflicts are getting worse, actually, not better. Conflict parties see new opportunities to prolong the killing rather than incentives to end it. Peace agreements are rare, and mediation and conflict resolution efforts are, we all know this, not working well enough. Certainly not. Dialogue has been replaced, not completely, but mostly, by a more transactional politics. We see this on our screens these last days. And outcomes are determined by hard power rather than principles. I query the concept of peace through strength in this context. But I'd like to share with you now a few observations that I have come to learn over the years of my experience in conflict mediation, more that than humanitarian action. International attention, I think we all know this too, and commentary on peacemaking is probably now at its highest for many years. It's top of the news cycle, but only in certain places. The focus is very narrow. When did you last talk about Afghanistan on the news, for example? That is a massive conflict, absolutely yet to be settled in any just way. And you could find so many other countries, Venezuela, as Ahmed mentioned. In addition, second point, a great deal of hope is placed on ceasefires as means to deliver humanitarian aid. The first efforts in Sudan, after that war started, that unnecessary war started, were focused almost exclusively on ceasefires to deliver for humanitarian aid. Not a bad priority, but to treat ceasefires in this way is akin to a doctor tackling the symptoms of disease rather than the root causes. Ceasefires do not work without addressing root causes. And I know because I have had a lot to do with failed ceasefires, and I can tell you, it's not a pretty sight. Without a political settlement, therefore, in the works, a ceasefire is always and everywhere a fragile thing. Ukraine shows us how wide the chasm is between ceasefires and long-term political negotiation. And it was, of course, a matter of debate in the various peace talks and in Alaska and so forth. And President Putin made much of looking at the root causes for reasons of his own. But ceasefires are not an end to war. The point I think that you made, Ahmed, quoting Kofi Annan. Long-term political negotiation is essential, and let's us be clear, it's not either or, we need both of them. We need both, each to strengthen the other. Now, right now, as we all know, all eyes are on Gaza. We see, rightly and thankfully, joyous scenes on both sides as prisoners and hostages are freed. But widen the lens, and we are still left with vast acres of rubble across the whole strip. A shattered landscape, a shattered society, untamed hatreds, and armed men ready to inflict more suffering and to remove the prospect for peace that has been so lauded, and thank God it has been these past few days. It's not wrong, as I've mentioned before, to prioritize the release of prisoners and hostages and a ceasefire indeed, which attends that, to get aid in and save lives. I think we all welcome it, I certainly do. But this is not yet about peace. Let's be clear. This is about saving lives, stopping suffering, and God knows that's probably the most important thing. It's what I've lived my life with. It's not yet peace. The deal itself, the peace plan, as currently described and advertised and discussed, does not indeed, as I think we all know, adequately describe, explain, or set out the necessary conditions for a sustainable end to the conflict. These include arrangements for that international stabilization force. These include governance arrangements for Gaza, which is necessarily accountable to its people. And then in addition to that, the ambiguities about IDF withdrawal and the absence of a plan for the end of the occupation and the path, a guaranteed path to a two-state solution. The ambiguities of these are extremely worrying. And it is a matter now of public comment. And it will be a matter of private negotiation, because all the negotiation on Gaza has been private. It's not been a public debate. And we all know that the oxygen of public debate is what peace negotiations need to have to give them a chance to succeed. But everybody, including us, certainly myself, welcomes these first steps, and we hope for the best for the future. Of course we do. It's not enough, however. The essential ingredient for the negotiations to come, which will be starting now, wherever that is is to make them more inclusive, to consult and establish a proper accountable dialogue with all those affected. This includes, firstly, the Palestinian people, who've had a walk-on role so far in these discussions. This includes also Israeli civil society and actors in the wider region who have legitimate important interests and who are giving succor to and pressure on and guidance to the peace plan. We must, our mediators, the three, must reach out to these affected people. And we hear, I'm sure, from my friends, my new friends, exactly the importance of that during the course of this evening. Without it, it doesn't work. It fails. And the failure rate of peace processes, even after agreements, is not low. But I'm not naive, I hope. I know how complex and time-consuming this call for inclusive negotiation and consultation can be. And I also know from personal experience, and you know this too, that the pace of a negotiation must be maintained. The momentum has to be preserved and protected. And parties need to be focused on delivery of what they have agreed to and what they will be involved in negotiating. So this process cannot be allowed to drag on in perpetuity. Any transitional structures, and we talk a lot about that in the Gaza plan, and mandates must, in my view, be of limited duration, open to challenge, open to change, rather than open-ended. That gives the people a chance in a different phase, probably in a practical phase, to have their views heard and their leadership reinstored. Looking elsewhere from Gaza, it is striking that the only major deal, and thank you, Ahmed, for referring to it, between Russia and Ukraine during that appalling conflict, unnecessary conflict, illegal conflict, is the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which the United Nations had a leading role. Mr. Guterres was the one to launch it. An agreement to support global food security, and a clear example, by the way, of humanitarian diplomacy. Many times during that negotiation, the mediation between Ukraine and Russia, with Turkey as the host and help, I was told by the two parties they couldn't do this deal without it having a humanitarian purpose. It would not have been possible to sell it to their base, in effect. It provided them a reason for doing something very, very politically difficult, and something which was at certain times, and certainly as it ended, quite unpopular in this continent. So it was a clear example of humanitarian diplomacy. It was a political deal, but it was with humanitarian purpose and humanitarian cover. But this arrangement was never intended to be temporary. It was meant as an entry point to build trust between the warring parties, as an early confidence building measure, as well as a contribution to global food security. And it did that for its limited duration. And it did not become an entry point to further such measures. These did not arrive. The energy came out of the balloon. There was an effort in Turkey to produce the second phase of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. It is still in existence, safe trade in the Black Sea, but the political will is completely absent, tragically and wrongly. And I mentioned this specific issue, it's a niche issue, if you like, in the Ukraine mediation and negotiation, simply because we still need them. You know, the morose efforts during this summer of diplomatic activity, a lot of energy, a lot of purpose, which is excellent, but not going anywhere, are exactly the sort of environment in which you need to have ancillary efforts to build confidence, to bring parties together, to agree things instead of to argue things. And we had that, and we gave it away. And there are many, many issues in the Ukraine war and in Ukraine where this can be rectified, and it can be a contribution to the formal process. So that's my one point on Ukraine. Quickly on Sudan is another conflict where mediation has been a slow process, as we all know. Recent signals from the Quad, I believe, are very encouraging and need close attention. Of particular importance also, as I was hearing in a meeting last week in London of Sudanese influencers and commentators and journalists unaffiliated with any party, is the growth of opposition from many Sudanese civilians to the inclusion of the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, excuse me, in a settlement, because of the terrible things that they are alleged and probably have done. And it's a very old dilemma in peacemaking and in mediation. It's the old dilemma of justice versus peace. It's the old dilemma of, why do you talk to bad people? I said my life doing that, often without success. It's a classic and persistent dilemma of peacemaking, and it's very, very visible, and it will become more so in the coming mediation on Sudan. That means a very simple thing becomes a very active and urgent priority for that mediation. Do not exclude the voices of the people. Parties, generally, in my experience, are quick to agree that civil society and others have no part to play in any peace processes. That's the one thing that they can agree on from the beginning. This pesky, detailed, you people, me too, who get in the way and are not convenient, and they're too complicated. Let's keep them out. And I had direct experience in Sudan on this. I was present as the United Nations humanitarian person at the first Jeddah process, where the US and Saudi Arabia brought together the two parties in Jeddah. And it was quite a successful meeting. It produced the declarations of commitments for the two parties on humanitarian issues, because it was focused on humanitarian delivery, at that time principally in Khartoum. I was not allowed in to the talks, but naggingly from the outside, I said, well, isn't this the time when you should have the emergency rooms heroes in Khartoum part of this discussion? Not least practically because they will be delivering the aid that you're talking about. No way. The parties agreed very quickly that that wasn't going to happen. And the result was a much less efficient delivery of aid, as well as disrespect, the fundamental disrespect for humanity that has been persistent in that process. As we've heard, indeed from Kofi Annan in a sense, peace is much more than the absence of war. To end fighting for good, we must tick many more boxes, and I want to just quickly go through them. First, this will not be a surprise to anyone in this room or listening. Any plan for peace must be rooted in respect for human rights and the rule of law. And I don't say that as an activist. I'm not an activist, in fact. I say that as somebody who knows the reality of why this is important. It is also a matter of activism. It is also a matter of our values. A transitional government in this context must be a government which is truly accountable, and there always are transitional governments in these processes, which is truly accountable to its people. Constitutional arrangements are necessary to protect people's rights. Syria is going through this very difficult phase as we speak, but it's an example. It's not the only one. That needs to be central, and we need to be very observant of ensuring, we all in the professional community, as well as in the diplomatic community, that that is part of the process. And I say this because it usually isn't. Secondly, any peace plan must have regional support and indeed should contribute to regional stability and regional relations. No country is an island, or in this town, because of Médecins Sans Frontières, the best humanitarian organization in the world is here, no country has borders in this context. Third, we must prioritize aid and reconstruction, because it is the foundation upon which peace sits. But I would extend that and make the investment in the economy, the equitable investment in the economy, the getting rid of sanctions, the access for people to credit and small business support, so that services and livelihoods and respect and a sense of the future can be part of the people's lives. The economy is so often, in my experience, and I blame myself, not a part of that central process. It's political. The economy is the bedrock also of peace. Fourth, a peace process must be open to challenge by the people. And the people here are the people in that conflict. By the people in legitimate and peaceful ways. It must be open to challenge. We were lucky, some of us, to be onlookers at the Kofi Annan process in Kenya in 2008. For me, the masterclass globally in mediation and negotiation. And one of the things that characterized it was the way in which he planned for the follow-through. And he kept with it for another 5 years, I think. And he planned for political change, constitutional change, because he knew what it will say here: too many agreements are undermined when international attention recedes. But he knew that in his weeds, he knew that, and he planned for it. And there was still pushback, as we know, in Kenya on the deal. Finally, accountability for crimes committed during conflict. I've mentioned this earlier, and a process for reconciliation and healing. Now, I remember sitting around a table in New York many years ago in the late last century with two titans of the United Nations, two very senior people unlike me. One was human rights, one was political diplomacy and mediation, and they were both arguing. I was trying to mediate. Disaster. Don't try mediating in the UN. I mean, that's a recommendation about peace versus justice. And the political representative, no names, of course, had just come back from the country that he was dealing with, and he said, "Look, I've just been meeting these warlords all over this country. Don't tell me I can't deal with them about what needs to be done in this Central Asian country." And the other person said, "But no, but you can't, because they're wicked and they're injudicious and they're illegal and they're criminals." He said, "Stop it." He said, "Don't tell me that, as I won't go back next time." It's an unresolved issue. It's an unresolved issue because there isn't a binary answer to it. There is no binary answer to it. We know that stability has to come, and it is the only environment in which the resolution of injustices can prosper. So let's not be naive about that. Kofi Annan, again, did a huge amount of work in his foundation, Corinne is here, on the timing of transitional justice and reconciliation. He was a leader in that, among many other things, because he knew that the timing was so important to the success of that, as well as the success of a transitional period. So progress lies not in choosing one of these over the other, but in providing for a harmonious coexistence. And again, as ever, the man knew that. These fundamental requirements for peace that I've just hopefully fairly quickly listed are both difficult and necessary. Asking the men with guns and their allies to give power to the people and their new rulers, ones they might choose, is an extraordinary demand and requires great courage from those warring leaders. I once realized, I think I was involved in the mediation in this continent, mentioned by Ahmed, that if you wanted to distribute Nobel Peace Prizes, it's a very topical issue these days, if you wanted to give out Nobel Peace Prizes, give it to the warring leaders. I'm not serious, okay, but they've done lots of other things which are not so good, because they take the big risks to end wars. And I was told once in my mediation in Aceh in Indonesia 25 years ago for the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, and I hope people are here from there, that when we had a ceasefire, the people of the insurgent group came to me and said, "This is to disrespect the deaths of our children and our families in the cause of independence. What do we tell them now? That it was all for nothing?" I said, "Don't ask me." It's a really, really important question. Getting the condition for concession from warring leaders in the ways that we all know, you know firsthand, needs to happen is very difficult. We see this now in Gaza, and we will see more of it. And this isn't, this inclusion that goes beyond the parties to the people, all the things that I've been describing, for me is not, and it's so rare, by the way, it's not about some ideological bias. This Geneva holds preeminently and speaks about. But I wonder if I was in the private sector, God forbid, and I was launching a new product. Of course, I'd ask my potential clients whether they thought this was good or not. Of course, we'd ask the people whether they thought peace was right or not. Of course, I'd ask the people whether this transitional arrangement was right or not. Big issue in Syria. Of course they would. Well, we need to do it even more importantly than they do. It's critical to peacemaking. It is about inclusion. It is about frontline communities. We'll hear more of this evening, won't we? It is about gender. We still don't have, despite Security Council resolutions and efforts in this town and across the world, we still don't have anything like parity between men and women on mediation. Nothing like it. And I experienced how that happens directly. And it reduces the compassion and the effectiveness and the broad involvement and dignity of the mediators. We want to make sure inclusion, gender, and asking the people who are going to be affected, just a simple question, has to become a norm. So this is a new style of mediation. It also includes, which is inclusion and gender. I was once involved in the Spanish Basque mediation, and I was more or less forbidden to go to the Basque Country in case I'd speak to the people and find out a lot about what they thought. And I won't say which party was more avid on this than the other. And we at the Centre for Humanitarian Dialogue had to get around it in very clever ways. But the new mediation has to insist on it. And my mediation in life has not insisted on it enough. Mea culpa. The second part of the new mediation is the Global South. You live it here. We live it in this city. We live the knowledge that we need to do much more to get leaders from the Global South, mediators from the Global South, values from the Global South, rejuvenation from the Global South, to bring back the energy and pressure and just leadership for peacemaking. I say Switzerland, of course, must and has and is playing a central role in this endeavor, and should also, as you said, Madame Fontenay, invest in the business of peacemaking. Training this new generation of mediators, let's just start with that. It's a vital priority. Geneva is essential as a partner to make this happen, and I think some of you are here in this institute for that purpose. So it is a partnership with the old world of mediators, but it's a partnership which puts the new world first. In the old phrase of one of the prime ministers of my country, bring the new world in to rescue the old. A small point, I believe training should focus on practice, on interpersonal skills, on the empathy needed in mediation, on the listening qualities, much more than on analysis and politics. So we need to include partnerships with the middle powers. I mean, Qatar is one obvious example. It's a great new mediating power, but there are many others. I was in a meeting last week in Oman with many member states there who have all the interest, ambition, and talent. Uruguay, Egypt, Turkey, South Africa, Indonesia, just to name a few. There's no lack of candidates. Now, to end, we start with the United Nations. I have spent 17 years of my life in the United Nations until last year. I joined it 7 times, which is why the pension is so small at the moment. My time. But, you know, I just wanted to say that bit because it shows my love for the organization and utter respect. I mean, with everything. It does, this is my mantra here, this is my mandate, my mission. It does remain the principal sort of legitimacy for maintaining international peace and security, for which it was set up, and which Kofi Annan, again, led it in such straightforward direction. It also has, we saw this in the high-level week in September, unique convening power. It's a good place to go and have an argument, and then Manhattan afterwards. But, and I'm not the only one to have written about this, it is fast losing its relevance. It has stepped away from primary peacemaking, allowing states, individual states, with their inherent interests, and of course all states have interests, this is not to be surprised about or even to demur, but allowing those states with their inherent interests to dominate negotiations. I was very glad to see, for example, the Secretary General of the United Nations in Sharm el-Sheikh earlier this week. I'd like to see a lot more of that. He also started the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Only the United Nations could have pulled that one off, I can tell you, because of its breadth of experience and because of its legitimacy. But it's the exception, unfortunately, that proves the rule. So without the courage to be relevant, we don't see UN peacemaking in the places we work. I would add that let us be clear that any failure in multilateralism, which is how the debate seems to be defined, and peacemaking through the UN is primarily a failure of the member states. It's worth remembering. They are the governors. I was a staff member of the United Nations all these 17 years, a volunteer of this and of that in the field and in New York and Geneva. So I was taught a lot about the importance of the intergovernmental governments of member states through the General Assembly, through the Security Council, through other bodies. That goes with the responsibility to do something and not just complain about it when the institution is in trouble. The failure of the Security Council to deliver on its mandate, we all know this, is largely due to the bickering between the permanent members of that council and the veto use, which has so saddened so many people in the places of conflict. And I sat through many long afternoons listening to how vetoes would stop any sense of hope for people in great suffering because of the interests of those different permanent members. UN80 reforms brought in by the Secretary General as a result of the funding cuts imposed by these very member states that I'm talking about can only go so far. It is about efficiency. It is about bringing back offices together. It is about trying to make sure there are less mandates. It is about presenting a more coherent process and proposition for the world to support. Fine, it's necessary. You have to save money. It's in a huge hole in its budget, but it's not enough. Member states, us as promoters of peacemaking and peace, need to say, we want to see the UN not so absent anymore in the places of conflict. Humanitarian organizations, represented here in Geneva, probably in this room, in my experience of late, complain a lot, rightly, about the fact that mediation is absent. They're left alone, more or less, in the fields of conflict with the armed men and do everything bravely to mitigate conflict, but they do not have the desire or will or talent to end the conflict. So we need UN's presence where wars are fought, and we need its judgment on how wars are fought. Kofi understood that mission. He lived his life by it. His deeds and his example are why we're all here tonight. And we, as peacemakers, I would suggest, must fight much harder to carry on his legacy forward to those difficult times. Not for his sake. He would not see that as appropriate or relevant, but for the millions of the people in the world who we wish to serve and we wish to involve and who must depend on us. Let us not let them down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin Griffiths, for those inspiring words, which obviously came from the heart and from immense immersion in this profession of mediation and caring for fellow man and woman listen to the voices of the people. So important, listen to the voices of the people. And Kofi Annan understood that listening was so important. Mediators who don't listen fail. Mediators who listen can get the warring factions together. And I remember in Syria, you did a very splendid job in one of the areas building trust between the factions and exchanging certain things for prisoners. Yes, so important to gauge the feelings and emotions of the people and act upon them. Music, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, helps create bonds. It can even inspire a more harmonious and peaceful world. La Banda de Música is a French association. Sounds Spanish to me. La Banda de Música. It's a non-profit organization that supports children living in poverty and offers an original form of education through learning music. How wonderful is that? It operates in Mexico mainly, in the suburbs of Oaxaca City, and in Cuba, to help youngsters through music. I would now like to invite a professional clarinetist and artist ambassador of La Banda de Música, Lester Chio Alonso, to come to the stage. Lester, please. Thank you very much, Lester Chio Alonso, for that beautiful performance. Beautiful. Martin, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to climb up onto the stage again. Climb. Yeah. Try these. And our young peacemakers or peace builders, and they are. I wish. Yes. Victoria Uper, Mariam Arib Amjad, and Ngia. Ngia, just Ngia, right? What impressive CVs you all have. Now, we were hoping to have a lengthy discussion, but I see that time is getting shorter and shorter. And Corinne, may I ask you, are they going to pull the plug on us at 6:30? They might. Reminds me of conference services at the UN in New York. No pencils after 6 o'clock. But I'm going to ask the three of our young peace builders first, to speak first. And shall I start with you, Victoria? Yeah? You're a member of the Peace Building Initiative, and you're a master's student here at the Graduate Institute, specializing in gender, race, and diversity.
Yes.
You're also an accredited lawyer, so I have to be careful.
Yeah. Yes.
But art,
criminal. Huh?
Criminal law, even better. Thank you. But art and creativity have been, I think, important drivers of your engagement, Victoria. Do you think creative approaches can also help unlock mediation dialogues that are stuck?
Thank you so much for the question, and Peace Building Initiative. Thank you so much for trusting me. I'm very happy to be here. Well, I think I will keep it simple because we have a short time, I think. But I think it's very interesting because I've always been used to talk about criminal law, gender justice, and I'm very happy to share this also essential part of my life that has been creativity and art in promoting social change. But that emerged not from a professional lawyer career thing. It emerged more from a personal experience, and I may start with also a personal story.
Please.
In 2020, I lost a childhood friend, and we had 20 years old. We were so shocked at the funeral, me and my friends, I say we, me and my friends, were so shocked at the funeral. And those who already attended the funeral and of a mother attending her own son's funeral know what I'm talking about. This mother at the funeral came to us and she asked, spread the word about organ donation because he had a health condition and he was waiting for a lung transplant. Do something for the cause. Well, say no more, because the next day, me and my friends, we were structuring, organizing, planning our first organ donation campaign on Instagram. We wanted to keep it simple because we were coping as well with the loss. Today, this organ donation campaign on Instagram is an institute. It has 5 years, 5 campaigns, a project implemented in schools with kids and adolescents, and several events. But why am I telling you this, right? This is a peace event. We're talking about conflict. And this experience made me realize the power of creativity, associative spirit, and art. The first main challenge that we faced while we were structuring this organization is that in Brazil, you cannot decide for yourself if you're going to be an organ donor. The family decides for you. And the rate of refusal is 45%. Knowing that one donor can save up to 8 lives, We quickly concluded we need to convince those families to say yes. But then came the second challenge, dialogue. How can you talk with your family about a very sensitive topic, very taboo topic, which is, I might not be here one day, and you might have to decide this for me. To solve that, we decided to focus on the life aspect of the organ donation, and that shaped all of our communication strategies projects. And one of my favorite things that we did was an art exhibition in which we partnered with 20 artists that contributed with exclusive pieces for these art exhibitions, and the result was incredible. Not only because each one of them contributed in their own way, and that resulted in a diversity of different subjectivities, answering the question of what is organ donation for you. But the most beautiful thing was after people coming to us and saying, I didn't know how to address this, but now I know. I want to be an organ donor, and I talked with my family yesterday, and we receive this type of message every time that we do something like this. So I think that art makes us feel connected to our humanity, perhaps, or at least to our emotions. I'm sure that the great majority of us already felt some strong emotions listening to music, watching a movie, a particular scene. Maybe you are thinking about these things right now that accompany us throughout our lives. And art does that. We learn so much about ourselves, about others, about different realities, different contexts through art. So my opinion is that precisely when we feel emotions, I think that's the start of a decision growing on us. So I think that that can be applied to conflict as well. Conflict is deeply emotional. So why not the solution emerge from an emotion as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Time has a way of running, doesn't it? I'm going to ask Miriam Arib Amjad very quickly also to tell us about her work as a peace builder and development practitioner from Pakistan. You use everyday peace indicators to connect community life with peace processes. So how can these methodologies enrich international mediation efforts that are very often, and we heard Martin Griffiths talking about being disconnected from people's lives. Yeah. The floor is yours, and you have exactly 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this very pertinent question. I'm really honored to be part of this space today. So to start with, Everyday Peace Indicators is basically an academic methodology which centers the ideas of the communities, which centers the realities of the communities. We're talking about how global mediation efforts are very disconnected from the everyday lived realities of people. So what EPI does is that it centers the community's everyday experiences. So it's not centering on very abstract concepts that more so often we talk about in global mediation spaces about peace, about reconciliation, about social justice, about arbitration. But what it does is that it really situates the community experiences into their everyday lives. And when you use this methodology, when you ask questions which are related to people's daily lives and not abstract concepts that they of course relate with but not on a daily basis, so what happens is that you are able to learn about signs and indicators which really speak to the communities. And I think that's how we fundamentally bridge that gap, in which we are really putting the communities at the center, really listening to what matters to them and what are some of the priorities that they have. So in the methodology, basically there are community-led focus group discussions. And then based on those focus group discussions, the communities indicates that these are the everyday peace indicators which matter the most to us. And there is also a very equitable voting process, which really prioritizes that these are the 3 top indicators that really matter to them. And we really want to have something designed along these indicators. So what we have been doing is that we have been working together with the communities to learn about these indicators and then coming up with an effective response, which really speaks to what they shared in terms of those indicators. And I think that in terms of how global peace mediation efforts can benefit from such participatory methodologies is basically focusing on how it is establishing a two-way communication channel. So the ideas are not, they are not, they are very bottom up. So they are not top down in the sense that you're really listening to the communities. And I think today we really focus on the aspect of really actively listening to the communities. So there is a two-way communication channel in which the communities is coming up with a list of indicators which matter most to them. And then the community is in itself designing a response or an initiative or a project designed along those lines. So I think that is really important, especially in terms of establishing the two-way communication channels and making sure that there is no power hierarchy and there is no hierarchy of dictation or the knowledge imbalance which is happening in any of the communications that we are having with our communities. And I think also in terms of it also dismantles the hierarchies in terms of who is the expert and who is not the expert, because our communities know best what is working for them and what is not working for them, because they are experiencing a conflict, a situation on a daily basis. And these indicators, the beauty of this approach is that these are very everyday indicators. So these will not be very big indicators like in terms like more in the negative peace sense, but they will be more in the positive peace sense. That the communities will be sharing that for us, for example, with the community that we work with, they were forcibly displaced from one region to the other, and we had a conversation with the women in that community, and the indicator, the priority indicator that they came up with us is that peace is when we have a proper washroom structure with a lock, because that community, alongside the many other issues that they were facing, is that they did not have any access to safe sanitation, and they had no, they basically were using makeshift washrooms. So for them, peace is having a tangible washroom infrastructure and there is a lock on it. So I think that really speaks a lot about how it's really important to value what is coming from the communities and not dismiss them as something which is very small or very everyday. I think that is really important to make sure that whatever the communities are sharing, it really speaks to them and it really matters to them. And also, I think that how the global peace mediation efforts can benefit from that is that the indicators which are coming up, then they could be used to design inclusive mediation processes. For example, if the community who have been conflict over a restoration of a water channel, if they have said that our immediate priority need is to basically have a tangible community space in which people from the opposite tribal groups can come up and have a conversation and decide how the land restoration project is going to be implemented with the cooperation of both the groups. So this is an indicator, and then we can use this indicator to design a mediation and conflict resolution process for that particular community. So I think that's how in times like these, we really need a lot of participatory approaches which really center our communities and make sure that we are actively listening to them, and not just listening to them and not leaving them just after having an academic exercise together with them, but using those indicators and using those data to actually design something tangible, because it's time when the communities are facing so many protected challenges. They do not want to be part of like repeated research and learning exercises and not getting anything tangible out of them. So it's really important that the data that we are looking at, that the indicators that we are measuring, we are actually using those indicators to design some tangible initiatives and infrastructures, which are of course, which speak directly to the needs of the communities. Thank you so much.
Miriam, thank you very much. Again, listen to the voices of the people, that bottom-up approach. Thank you. A very rich 3 minutes. Ngia, I would like to beg the organizers to give us another 6 minutes, if possible. 6 to 10 minutes, max. 12, maybe. I'm negotiating, Manu. Ngia, you have an amazing CV. I was very impressed. You're a political legal scholar. You're a strong advocate for peace and security and a multitude of other fields, ranging from climate change to ocean conservation. But what I want to ask you is, young actors like you often bring fresh perspectives. What specific contributions can youth make to build bridges between parties who deeply distrust each other? Yeah.
Thank
You have
for-
3 to 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that important question. You know, like when both sides deeply distrust each other, it's like the great wall of ice stand between them. It's cold, it's hard, and the leaders negotiating are often carried the heavy weight of the past to build this wall. So this is where young people like us, we can have the unique powers. We are not defined by the past in the same way. We are defined by the futures we all now share. And our contribution is not just new ideas. We are bring the new energy to the negotiations. And from a perspective, we can have to melt the walls of ice in 3 ways. First, we are the human connectors. Why the leaders out there, they negotiate politics. Young peoples, we can build the bridges between peoples. We can organize the joint projects for sport or art, or we can also, you can see, if 2 young people, they share a meal or they have a family in it, they can become an enemy. They become a person. And these are small human connections can have to create bonds that start to melt the wall. And second, we are the translator of hopes. Why we are not trapped by the old arguments. We can listen to the stories of loss from both sides and hear the same fundamentals, fears, and our dreams. We can hear the parents' fears about their child's futures from one side and hear the exact same fears from the others. And our role is to translate their shared hope into our common language for our leaders. And third, we are the living reminders of what's at stake. When we are in the negotiation tables, our presence alone sends a powerful message to the leaders. We are the futures being decided. We are the face of generation who will live with the consequences. Mm-hmm. So our presence asks for the question, is today's fight worth sacrificing our children's future or not? And yeah, our presence is important, and our presence cannot be an exception. It must be the rule. And it means the meaningful and funded access, especially from the grassroots advocates from the global south like me. It's meaningless if the seats and the tables, we cannot afford to accept that negotiation and afford to get a journey to get there. And most importantly, we need the access to the most in the table where the hard issues are discussed, peace and security. Like too often, the young people, we are welcome to talk about the climate or education, but we face the pushback and stigma when we demand to talk about the peace and security. And that's the reason why we have and also we are told we are too idealistic. But from a perspective, our idealism is our strength. And it's the refusal to accept that the war is inevitable. And this is why my EDMN Foundation and also my organization, the Majority Group for Children and Youth, are important. We are organized, we are partners, we are ready to partners. And right here, and in fact, right here at the Geneva Peace Week, we are hosting the workshop on youth in negotiating tables, marking the 10 years of the UN Youth Peace and Security Agenda. And we will be running conflict mediation platform and simulations to build practical skill for everyone. And it proving that we are essential partner for future. So to wrap it up, I firmly believe that young people plays an important role in multilateral negotiation. We're not just observer.
No.
We are active peace builders. We are the translator of hope. We are the human connectors. We are the living reminder of the futures. We don't come to the table to take a side. We come to the table to build their path forward together and create a brighter
Bravo.
future. Thank
Bravo.
you.
And you have just demonstrated that new energy that should be brought to the table. And I think that those three words, "we are the future," sums it up really. And you remember Kofi Annan used to say that youngsters should play an important role in peace building. And I remember Hajar, one of the young peace builders from Libya, said in one of these events, Kofi Annan is not the past. Kofi Annan and his ideas are the future. And on that note, Martin, can I give you the last word? Either to advice to young peace builders, or maybe you want more advice from them.
No. I want more advice from them, to be serious. I want more advice from them because of the reasons you've all said. And let me just, my takeaway.
Microphone.
I'll start again. Shall I do the speech?
No. We have copies.
Oh dear. I love what you all said, and I agree with it fundamentally. The first one, listening to communities. I learned a lot about this when many years ago in Asia, I was working for UNICEF development activities, where this was really important. And I had that great privilege as a young person in my 20s in Laos and Pakistan, actually, to suddenly be exposed to that moment when you realize from listening to the frontline communities, the people that you're all talking about, how the world has changed. It changes like that, the famous light bulb moment. And one of my aims when I was in the humanitarian job, which my last one in the UN, was to try to get humanitarian organizations to do the same, which they're not necessarily very good at because they're in a rush, of course, to save lives. But anybody who has listened to a frontline community, even for a speck, let alone the fact that you're immersed in it and do it and build it, knows the world cannot be the same again. And so without you, we don't have validation. The second thing, I was thinking about human, and it was one of the two things that I thought would be very interesting for me to sort of contribute. One is, if you look at the actions that you can take, you've all said it's actions within your own community, including the organ story. It's actions within your own community to build solidarity, to build energy, to build institutions. Kofi was the great institutional builder, as we know, but also to network beyond it. And it's so fantastic to the Kofi Annan Foundation that they brought all of us together from all over the world. Build relations with your community first, which you're doing, and wonderful ideas that you were saying, and build your networks to those people doing that frontline mediation, doing the sort of taking the responsibilities which they don't necessarily should have, to make sure that they listen, to make sure that you do the leadership that you were talking about. I want to, one last very quick thing. When I was in Aceh, I used to go to visit difficult places around the world. I went to Burkina Faso a couple of years ago after a coup, and it was full at war. There was war all over the country. And I visited a village which had been cut off entirely from access to food and supplies by Al-Qaeda fighting in the vicinity of the village. Village of about 70,000 people. Internally displaced people had come 170,000 to live on the margins of the village. There was no food left by the time I was arriving because the fighting was very close and the road was cut off. And I heard a story that, and this is where I'll stop, heard a story from women and their families, and their son actually played a most important role, about what they did about the lack of food. They'd run out of food, and so they'd focused on the leaves and salt which they could find in their village to feed their family, to feed their children. It was the only thing left. You can look at Gaza as another example. But those leaves and salt ran out as well. What did these mothers do? And it was all mothers. In the night times, they crossed the wall lines, crossed the lines with Al-Qaeda and the Burkina soldiers to get leaves and salt from the villages beyond the immediate vicinity. What did they do when they brought it back? They gave it to the displaced people. Now, this sounds first, and it sounds unreal, but it's a universal truth that you find when you have the privilege of going around to these various places in the world, including where you live. Solidarity and humanity is not diminished. And the courage of those women, and the boy, who was the son of one of these women, sat there at that table and cried. And he just cried because so many of his friends had died. And he cried for the sentiment, the feeling. It was a loving cry as to what was happening by his people, by his mothers and his friends' mothers. So you're working with solidarity, you're working at the front line of humanity. It's not here, it's where you're working. Bring us that truth, bring us that spirit so that we may be inspired and infused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you all, young peace builders, old timers. I'm leaving. It's not over yet. It's not over yet. I won't make the same mistake I did last year. I just have something very short to say. Thank you all for being here and being such a wonderful audience. There are copies of the Kofi Annan Foundation. I have to plug the foundation. Annual report. Please get your personal copy. Corinne might even agree to sign it. And find out how the initiatives of the foundation impact communities worldwide. It's marvelous work that they're doing. They're empowering young leaders, promoting peace and democracy, and advocating for international cooperation. And with that, we come to the end of a wonderful event. Thank you, young peace builders. Thank you, Martin Griffiths, for your inspiring work. And thank the audience.